I think one thing that I've learned through, working with other people and creative and leadership, running a business is more than half of the work is done when you show up. The moment you show up, everything else starts happening from there. It's like you and I were talking about getting started. When you get started, it's just so many things that will come, but if you don't get started, it's like shot not taken is shot missed.
Hello, and welcome to another Lived Quality conversation on the Lived Quality podcast. And today I'm privileged once again to have Robert joining me. And we've had Robert on the podcast before. And yeah, Robert is a longtime friend of mine. He's a business person, he's a technologist, he's a parent. I don't know if you're a musician, but yeah, he works in the music industry as well. And he's a man of many talents and many ambitions. It's great to have you on again, Robert. How are you doing? How's your morning going so far?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me back again. I'm really privileged to be chatting with you once again. Yes, I'm doing well. I'm not a musician. I'm not creative at all, but um, I believe that I know what good versus great looks like. So I ride on that wave to associate myself with creative stuff, but I can't do anything creative at all. That is my belief, but I bring other things to the table, which is complementary to the creativity. Yeah.
Maybe that's your way of being creative, right? Like that's your way of expressing your creativity by, organizing the creativity, right?
If you come to think of it, actually, yes, because I think if we confine the definition of creativity as something that is, physically tangible, like I create a piece of art, oh, now I'm creative, and then it loses the meaning. I think creativity can go into, like, a speaker can be creative, a poet can be creative, and a leader can actually be creative. So yes, if you expand that definition, definitely, I would like to believe yes, I would fall in there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, yeah. Like I believe everybody has like their uniqueness can be expressed, and the way to express it is some form of creativity. And when they do that, for them, it sort of becomes like some kind of play. Like they don't feel like they are working to do that, so it's just something they do. And usually, like when you ask them, they will describe it in such a trivial way that it doesn't sound as excellent as it looks.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was watching a this documentary. They put up a documentary for Man City about when they won the treble.
Yeah.
And there's a moment in there, I think in the first or second episode, they asked Kevin De Bruyne. He took this very good set piece, a free kick, and it curved so beautifully, like it was almost perfect, like it hit the inside of the post and bounced inside, and it was such a beautiful goal. And so when they were asking him about it, he's like, wow, what you did was incredible. And he was describing it. It's like, look, I settled myself, and I tried. I tried. I took the shot, and I didn't know what was going to happen, but the way it went, I was amazed. Like that happened. So it's not something he didn't intend it. He only tried the best he could, and once the moment he kicked the ball, he couldn't tell what was going to happen. But he also, when he looked at it at the end, he was like, wow, that's cool. That's cool. But he can't claim that this is exactly what he did to make it cool. He also doesn't understand.
And that response is so perfect, that a lot of the time the big chunk of the work gets done when you show up, when you do it. And because a lot of times people worry so much on the outcome, but they don't understand an outcome needs an input. So he did it. All he had to do was to kick the ball. That is a very brilliant response. So how the ball curves, there are other factors involved that is completely out of his control.
Mm.
He might have had an idea of how to kick the ball, but he completely did not have an idea on like the wind, at the time, the pressure in the ball and the people who are standing to block that shot. Those factors he didn't have. And I think one thing that I've learned through working with other people and creative and leadership, running a business is more than half of the work is done when you show up. The moment you show up, everything else starts happening from there. It's like you and I were talking about getting started. When you get started, it's just so many things that will come. But if
Mm.
you don't get started, it's like shot not taken is shot missed.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a very good one. For full disclosure, I've been looking at that documentary just because of my affiliation with another team. I've not got time to watch it, and I don't want to watch it because I feel like my heart is gonna. Anyway, that is a side. It's a segue.
You don't want to
Yeah,
betray,
I don't
your
want to ruin
loyalties.
the beautiful work. Right? I'm like, I'm gonna stay out of it. Maybe I will watch it. I think there's so much to learn in from there as well. I'll definitely watch it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. You should. I highly recommend it. I've when I started, like, I skipped over it a few times. I wasn't sure what it was about. Um, but then I was like, look, I'll just give a go and see. And it was interesting because then this guy, Pep Guardiola, their coach, he's been quite successful, and you try to see what what makes him tick. What is he doing with the team, and what is his approach? And you can that is completely on display, and it's quite amazing that even at such a level of success, such as he's had, he also doesn't take it for granted, right? He's always working hard. He's calling out things. He's he's not so different from me and you, just trying to solve a, an everyday problem. It's like
Yeah.
he's taking it one game at a time. He's focusing on what's the problem to solve, and the problems are always endless. Even when it looks like things look perfect, it's yeah, there's always things to work on.
That that
But
is
yeah,
that is actually a very it's a very practical thing. The thing is, I we talk about like showing up. The other one is doing the work. You show up, you do the work, and then sometimes it goes into multiple directions. Sometimes it goes the way you thought it would go. Sometimes it will go completely different from the way you thought. I think a lot of people are more attracted to the face value, but not the process. You know, it's it's rare that something just happens without effort behind the scenes. Even like the most successful people, there's so much story behind like the process to get there. It's unfortunate that a lot of us look at what is presented before us and say, wow, that is amazing. It is, yes, it is, but it takes so much. It takes so much. Even look at this podcast you're setting up. Like, if you start releasing behind the scenes what you have to go through, even to this level, is so much work in there, right? It's so much work. And when we see something perfect, actually, I was watching something on YouTube where somebody was commentating, and they said Cristiano Ronaldo is absolutely amazing footballer, but the work that he puts in is excruciating. It's like they say during his time in Manchester United, after 2 hours of training, he would remain back for 2 more hours. He's practicing free kick. He's practicing game reading. He's practicing like when everybody else is gone, he's behind. But then come match day, everybody's like, wow. But
yeah.
yes, that's what we see. We don't see behind the scenes. So absolutely, that is a very good parallels.
Yeah, and speaking of behind the scenes, we were speaking yesterday, like as a business person, like uh, maybe I want to take us in that direction. Like what has it been like for you setting up a business? Because I know, like, even before we've moved, let's say, to Australia, you've always been a business person. Um, you you're an entrepreneur at heart, right? It's like you're always thinking of it in an entrepreneurial way. How can I take what I'm doing and package it and scale it? uh so I've been curious about that. What has it been like for you building a business in a first world country, and what you know the processes you've had to deal with, what your lessons, things you've had to unlearn, things you have had to learn again, and yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's all it predates all the way back, like long time ago. Is some of the things that I do are more passion driven. For example, being in the music and entertainment, they were a build up of many things that happened in my life from youthhood to becoming an adult. um, to be more specific on that part, because that is also a large part of what I do. I work with creatives, and the creatives I work with are mostly from developing world, um, and it's by choice, because coming from that environment, I know firsthand what it means for opportunities to be scarce. I know what it means for resources to be scarce, and I know what it means to have wealth of creative people, really smart people, and there are no opportunities. So, so I made that conscious decision that, well, I want to do something, but I would like to see more of the recipient coming from a place that I've spent most of my life. I've been in Australia for 10 years, but I've spent a big chunk of my life living in Uganda, walking on the streets and associating with all sorts of people. So that part of me is still very profound. So yeah, and I started this because that's what I wanted to do, and I'm doing. But the behind the scene part of it predates long time ago. So going back, and this is gonna make me sound really old for your young audience, but I'm not that very old. Going all the way back, we used to have these cassette tapes. The cassette tapes, it was a medium through which we would enjoy music. And I got drawn into, I started unknowingly studying the different compartments of things, entertainment. So the first thing that I noticed in the village where I was living, there used to be a lot of parties. These parties were on, let's say, Easter. The whole of Easter weekend is everybody's organizing parties and drinking and whatever. And
Mhm.
then the other one, like during like Christmas parties, then we used to have like traditional weddings and stuff like that. So, and the catalyst for those parties was music. And then not many people had access to having like a record player, or like what we used to call cassette player. Um, and they were expensive at the time. I know Sony used to make them. Panasonic used to make them. Like so many of those. So we had spots of people who owned those devices. The cassette players. But what they lacked were the abundance of the cassettes to give more
Mhm.
diversity to the music. They lacked that. So you would find somebody owns the cassette because they worked all their life to buy it. But now to start curating the music was a huge problem. And for me, that is the entry point I saw. I saw that entry, I was like, oh, it's going to take me probably years to save to buy a cassette player. But I have small money that comes in, If I like dedicate myself, I can buy at least one cassette per week or one cassette tape per month or per week, right? So fast forward to when I'm in high school, I end up with a suitcase full of cassettes. These are things that I kept buying, like without even knowing. I would hear this music, new music, nobody has it, most likely
Mm.
on the radio, and then I want to buy it. Then I want to buy it. So I kept buying these cassette tapes, and by the time I was going to uni, I had over 3,000 cassette tapes. And then arriving there, like, oh no, there's something called CD. People don't use cassettes anymore. I was like, what? So I had to unlearn the entire, and I also bought like a player because now I'm in uni. And then I went to the CD world, curated lots of CDs, and then before we know it, everything is on streaming. So anyway, long story short, it all started like a passion that I really wanted to do until prior to COVID, just prior to COVID. Um, um, before I moved to Australia, just way before I moved to Australia, I had this vision of building a radio. I think you and I have talked about it. And I created this radio platform. You helped me a lot to understand a few things. Thank you so much. My passion for that radio was I'm like, if I can get 5,000 people who can listen to me in a year, I think I will be happy. I was not thinking of business at all because I was like, I have all this knowledge in music and how it should be. So why should I create something? It turned out that the radio was being listened to at least 20,000 per day. That became
Wow.
so overwhelming for me that I'm like, oh no, I don't know what to do with this. Then more ideas started coming like, hey, what can you do from this? And that's how everything started expanding into a record label, into publishing, into distribution, into understanding the business of music. While I was doing this, the things that were hitting me right in the face was the lack of knowledge around the things that I'm doing back home in Africa, in Uganda, in developing world. Because every time I'm having a conversation with this creative who has been here for, let's say, has done it for 10 years, and I start mentioning some of these things, they were completely clueless. So, in a nutshell, if you look at the entire creation of music, I started from the end. From the end, it's like once the music is ready, where does it go? Who do you need to know? What do you need to do? What infrastructure is there? What revenue streams are there? What platforms exist other than the streaming platform? What are the legal things that you need to look? I started from there because I knew that I cannot create music, but I felt like my years of research and understanding how things are, I would provide significant value there. Neither did I know that actually is a huge part of the whole ecosystem. So
Mm.
when I met the creative, they came with all this creative. I came with all this wealth of knowledge, and then we merged the two. So it was like,
Mm.
oh, you have this half. You are looking for this half. I have this half. So we have now a whole thing, and that's how the whole thing started. And that has given me opportunity to look into what the creative space is all about, like what happens. It has given them also a lens to look into, like, oh, once I'm done in the studio, it's not yet done, like. so so all that has been like, yeah, lots of experiences. So that has been so rewarding and challenging. And we'll
Mm.
go through some of those. One of them, I can just say, I wrote it down here. um, I don't know whether the camera can see. I wrote that one: forget to record. When
Yes.
you start, oh, let me record. So there's this profound moment where we wanted to do a live music, like live recording. And we hired this amazing director of photography, and director as well, a film director, who came with a crew, and we had a set all built, set design, amazing. And then they were supposed to record 4 songs in a day, the whole day production. So they went through the first song, they recorded. So while the footage was uploaded, now for the edits to happen, they realized one of the song was not recorded. So, and because I didn't understand so much the creative part, I was like, how is that even possible? That you can have the entire song performed with all the equipment and you forget to press record. I didn't understand it until another creative told me like it happens all the time. It happens all the time, like especially in filming, like everything is all set and then they shout action. And guess how I learned that as well? Because I started getting more interested in film directing. So I'm doing things with my kids, and we do record. And there
Mm.
was actually a time when they were all ready to go to perform their dialogue, and I was like, "Action!" Guess what? I didn't record it. I didn't record it. So then that thing clicked me like, oh, okay. It's actually sometimes if you are interested in a big scheme of things, and
Mm.
you can contribute a specific thing in that big scheme of thing, it doesn't hurt if you have knowledge on the other part as well. Even if you can't do it, just have an understanding, because that what I've realized, it has created some level of empathy as well. So now I
Mm.
look at the creative like, oh no, what they go through, you need to understand in order to empathize. And I learned quickly that um, if I think you have noticed that there's always conflict between, let's say, record label and the artist.
Mm.
That relationship is never happy, to be honest. Like what we see is always the 1% of the most successful. The 99% nobody speaks about them. Why? Because the creative can focus so much to be creative and forget the business. And the business
Mm.
focus so much on the business and forget the creative. Both of them then realize that they actually need each other for this to work. So a little bit of knowledge on either side actually helps a lot, and that is some of my experiences. Yeah,
Yeah, no, that's really good because some of the themes coming up for me from that sharing, it's like there's a deep need to understand. And if you a couple of weeks back, I was really contemplating on what does it mean to understand. And uh, so there's this thing you can look up. You can look up the etymology of the word,
yeah,
and then it gives you the history of where this word comes from and what it originally meant.
yeah,
And so you can see that originally this is how this word came to be a thing. This is the phenomena it was representing. And so I was looking at understanding, and it seemed like it was more trying to capture an experience of being inside a certain context, right? And so it means like for you to be able to understand something, you should be able to see how how that thing works on the inside, right? Like you need to have an experience of being on the inside of it. And
yeah,
so from what you've shared there, it's like you you have had these experiences. It's like you started off as a consumer and then you had this interest of gathering this product, the music and the tapes, right? And that all drove you in a in the direction of where you ended up building a radio and then putting it together now into like this record label. And the interesting thing you shared there was like when you went to do that, you found that you had already seen what happens, like once the product is created, that whole world after that, you had a great understanding, but there was a gap of this understanding of that, how that world works, from the creatives who produced this.
yeah,
And so that was an opportunity, and this is a great mark of good relationships. It's like any good relationship, it it always has this quality whereby uh the members of that relation all have a part in it, and that part is very clear. It's like the relationship is always bigger than both parts, and you need both parts for it to happen.
Yes.
Like in your case, you needed that understanding of how that part, the external side of the publication, of how you take the market to you take the product to the consumer, but then you needed the product,
Yeah.
and they had that. You didn't have that, and they didn't have a way to market this, and so you had something to add to them, and they had something to add to you, and together this would bring about this new creation. And I think that in itself is something very, very important, something that you both have a shared responsibility
Yeah.
for. And you see this like in even in our day-to-day relationships, like like you're married, like even with your children, it's
Yeah.
like when you work with them, you have to have a respect for their part in what you're doing in this relationship, in this thing that you have together.
Yeah.
Without having that without having that relationship, without having a respect for that,
Yeah.
you end up getting into a position where you dismiss or you undermine that contribution,
Yeah.
and in the process that can lead to cracks developing in that thing, and then it starts to die. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Which this
that's
is
that's
really
beautiful. Hey.
interesting because two things as you were talking, and just
Hmm.
I'm just thinking of real life experiences of my experience into this. You and I, we share um a common skills, which is testing and quality assurance.
Hmm.
Um, even though I was going all through those phases to come to where I am, and be part of this massive business venture, I never knew my QA and testing would be needed. I never knew. Um, I think one of the common interview questions in the former company where you and I worked was, how do you test a sink? You
Hmm.
remember, how do you test a sink? Yeah. So um, knowing the business part of things and having some clue on the creative side of things, I quickly also realized that I can actually be of use in the quality assurance and the testing part of it. Now, all this starts dawning on me because remember, I started way back as a consumer.
Hmm.
So that exposed me to all sorts of sounds. It's like my affinity to music genre spanned from country music to gospel music to hip hop music. It's a wide variety of genres, right? That journey gave me some sort of an hearing that is a little bit different, right? And then combine that with my QA curiosity and testing abilities. So now what is happening these days is I have become like the guinea pig that tests the music. It's crazy. It's crazy in this way that when 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 we make the music, when I say we, because now I'm in part of this ecosystem, though I don't make any music, right? When we make this music, even before we get it out there, sometimes we have it for months, for weeks. Even some music we still have, it's been there like 3 years. But during that process, is this a rigorous process of testing? You can attest to this that sometimes I send you like, hey man, take a listen to this, give me your feedback. All that is part of the testing because the creatives needed to understand that they are doing this for people. And these people are both creatives and non-creative as well. And therefore, if we go into the cocoon of the studio and make this amazing art and it doesn't resonate with the people, we're just making it for us. That's a passion. It's not something that we can build a structure and business around it. So I use extensively my testing abilities. And I understood that first and foremost, which are the the media through which people listen to music. We know that the music can be on Spotify, but what are the top three devices that we use to listen to the music? I tell you, based on my experience and the stats of the distribution, is mobile phone. Mobile
Mm.
phone accounts to over 70% of every music we listen, at least from the
Mm.
catalog that I have, which is close to like maybe millions of streams that I have if you collect everything. When I look at those stats, it's mobile phone. Mobile device is the medium through which people listen to the music the most. The second one is the car. A lot of people listen to music in the car. You're dropping your kids to school, you're playing music, or you are going on a road trip, you're playing music. So the music needs to sound nice on the phone and it has to sound nice in the car. Then the third one that people normally is like when they're doing like on a party. So they may have like this Bluetooth speaker or some boombox of sorts, and it's a weekend, barbecue is going on, food is flowing, drinks are flowing, right? So those are the top three. And then you have clubs and stuff like that. So when we started this now, these days what I do is, does it sound great on the phone? Not
Mm.
high-end phone, even like from like low-end phone to high-end phone. I can show you. You can't. I don't know if you will guess. This is an iPhone. This
Looks like an iPhone 6 or something like
is
that.
iPhone 7.
Ah, okay. Close, close.
So I have to test it on such kind of device. Like, does it sound nice, right?
Yeah.
Because if it sounds nice there, I guarantee you on the other fancy devices it will sound great as well. So I brought in that, and that has been so intriguing. So the guys that I work with are like the tester. Robert is the tester, and it plays so well because I am completely testing this from a consumer perspective, not from a
Mm.
creative perspective. Creatives will look at the chord progression. They will look at the reverbs and all these jargons, right? For me, it's the feeling, right? It's the feeling. So then
Yeah.
you have the same feeling when I'm listening on the phone versus on my laptop, in my car, on my boombox, whatever, and
And it's really great. Just something to add to that, um, because when, like, for example, when you send me those sound clips, it's like, listen to this, right? Uh, it's interesting you said the feeling, because it's the same sense I'm using. It's more like, what is it that this feels like in this moment?
yes,
Because I think we dismiss this a lot, but like every moment we are living is like a real reality, right? And a real reality is like a representation of truth. It's like something existing is what like really truth is, right? And we have a sensitivity for that. It's like they for something to not be true, right? It has to be non-existent, right?
yes,
And so we tend to dismiss that, and we don't really think about it in that sense. But when you start to think about it and take it seriously, you find that that experience, right, is really, really vital. And so starting to lean into that and take it seriously, like, what's the quality of what I'm experiencing right now? How do you sense that? Lean into your senses and gather that data to give you what that is like.
yeah,
And I think through like taking that seriously, then you actually start to know how to respond and how to resonate with what's unfolding. And the other thing there you touched about is reusing your experience, and which is the same thing. It's like you have to like really take it seriously and rely upon it, because you see this in children, like when they're growing up. Do you know how long it takes for a child to develop a certain kind of sensitivity for certain things? And all these people we call experts, they just have had more exposure in of a certain thing or a certain quality of experience that they are really exposed to for a long time, and so they are able to tell you the nuances of that, of the details of that experience, right? Like if we go back to the thing we're talking about with De Bruyne
Yeah.
taking the ball, it's like what he knows how to do, like his expertise is on how to kick that ball.
Yeah.
And so he will settle and focus his mind like, this is how I have to kick this ball.
Yeah.
And whatever happens after that is really, I don't know. Like I just
Yeah.
need to do this part.
Yeah.
And if you focus and you do that part well, like kick that ball,
Yeah.
do the best of your ability, then you unlock all the other doors, which is the same thing that you're saying. It's like even in the little ways of like, all I have to do is gather this experience. It's like, how is it like really consumed? Like, you know, at a party, right? Like in the car,
Yeah.
it's on the phone.
Yeah.
Which phones are they using? And
Yeah.
and this is very serious because
Yeah.
my God, we don't take this as seriously as we should. Because I'll give you an example of the music, like how music has transformed. For example, even just my parenting and just, you know, creating an atmosphere that brings the family together. So we have this little tradition in my home whereby we every Friday we watch a movie. Like, you know, we get some takeout and we'll sit together and one of us will pick a movie and we take turns every Friday. Someone else picks a movie and we watch it together. So it's a great experience, but I found that I could improve the quality of that. So what I would do, I would then, once we've seen a movie and everybody had some good fun, because we watch a lot of musical movies, I mean, there's children involved, I'd go find the music of, you know, the soundtracks of this movie and get the soundtracks and put them in the car for us to listen. And amazingly, like even for some of the movies that are not musical, like, you know, it's just, you just have the score, right? It's like, you know, this is the sound that was playing during this scene. You can see the children relieve that. It's like, oh no, this is the scene where this and this happens, and then the dialogue comes back to them, and then they start to act it out. You're like, whoa. So even just listening to the music alone brings back that whole experience. It makes them have a deeper sensitivity to that experience, which now extends it even. It's like if if they grow up later, you know, several years from now, I'm pretty sure they will not forget these experiences. Yeah. Because they're so deeply ingrained. And every time they hear this song, it evokes a whole world of experience that draws them back. And
Yeah. Absolutely.
yeah, like the philosophers call it serious play. It's like it's a game, but you're playing it in a serious way. And I can't overemphasize the, you know, the importance of music in all of that, because man, it has so many aspects to it that, you know, when we get into it, it's like it changes the whole experience.
Yeah. You know, as you
Yeah.
were talking, the another learning that is really interesting how when you develop a skill in something, the possibilities of you reusing it in other things is limitless. You know, there are certain things that you apply even in your parenting that perhaps you might have picked from work. And there's some things that you apply at work that perhaps you might have picked as a parent, you know, as a parent. Um, some of the things that I quickly learned, and these are two parallels that are very interesting. One is as a parent, the other one, of course, working with the creatives. So I learned quickly that working with the creatives is all about ensuring that they have the conducive environment to create. It's not about stoking pressure on them. It's not about telling them what to do. It's creating some sort of a framework and them understanding that the framework is we're doing this for this kind of audience. Now, how you do it is I completely rely and trust So long as they understand, like, oh, this one here we are making it for the commercial, or this one we are making it for listening, or so even the songwriting is tended towards that. But you don't need to tell them every word they need to write, because as you're saying, it's the feeling. Once they put themselves into that feeling, yo, bro, what they can create is amazing. The other parallel is with my kids. Because of my affiliation in music, I enrolled them like for piano lessons. We even bought like keyboard, not piano keyboard, all the way from Uganda. When we came here, we moved it here as well. My firstborn is now 14, going to 15. He started learning keyboard way from Uganda when he was 3. So he came in here to Australia. We even enrolled him to a class. Then my daughter as well joined in the class. And then at first, as a parent, we were anxious, like we are paying all this money, but we're not seeing the return on investment. You need to learn, you need to play. And then I start working with the creative. Then I realized that if you want this creative to give their best input, don't force it. So, and then I took all that learning and I put it on all these things that we're doing for the kids to actually learn. So what we did was we stopped paying for the school for the piano lesson, but we left the piano there in the living room. Right? They would come. Oh, I want to learn saxophone today in school. Oh, I want to learn a guitar. Every time they change, I was like, but you need to first master one thing. No, no, I don't like it anymore. So I'm like, okay, let's keep going. Um, so recently, I was just seated in the living room, watching TV, and my son just comes on the piano, on the keyboard, and he starts. I will send you that clip of the record. I will send that clip, and I was like, "Yo, what is happening?" So I recorded it. I was like, without even him knowing. And then I realized, I was like, oh, this is what the creatives were teaching me. That if you leave them and all you need to do is let that platform be there, let that conducive environment be there. Don't force it.
Mm.
Yeah, the
Mm.
things that can come out of there is extremely amazing. And that is like also speaks to the thought leadership. As a leader, people have different personas and different ways of working and reception to instructions and stuff like that. If you can tender that to fit certain different variations of people, I think the output will always be amazing.
I completely am in agreement with that. It's like creativity has to be allowed to emerge, and it emerges in the right conditions, right? Like there's a guy, I think his name is, he passed on now, he was a professor, um, Chikset Mihai, I think that's his name. I forget all of it, but he wrote this book. He did a lot of research about flow, right? And the thing he discovered, like he was studying all these athletes, musicians, like creative people, and he found that the thing that really, their experience of when they they're in flow is not something that they will, but under the right circumstances, it happens, right?
Yeah.
And they can't tell you when it's going to happen or how it will happen. It's more like it's something that sort of almost like possesses them when it's happening. And then there's certain you'd say signals of knowing when it's happening. It's like their experience of how time is changing. Either time slows down or it goes really fast, or they being in the zone, right? It's like they feel they can see so much detail without really other people seeing the same detail. And so it's about creating that framework that will really unlock it. And like you're sharing there with your son, uh, and we also did the same thing. It's like
Yeah.
there's a piano here, and every now and then you see somebody come,
Yeah.
sit on it, and then start to play something,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's like if you allow for it to happen, then it starts to happen. It's like there's a drum kit. It's like every now and then you see somebody sit on and then
Yeah.
start. drumming. And you're like, oh, okay. So it's sort of like the drum or the instrument speaks to these people, and then there's like some weird language they're speaking with it, and then all of a sudden the creativity
Yeah.
sort of like happens.
Yeah.
And the repetition of this
Yeah.
then, I think, then increases their sensitivity, which then starts to improve that expertise, because then they get more detail, more nuance, and it's like that. It compounds. And yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
you know this from work, right?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
from that company we both worked for.
Yeah.
uh the idea was like, if you put creative people together, like brilliant people together, in a room where they have to solve a problem, uh, and allow for them to do it, give them a framework where they can bring their creativity, bring their knowledge, bring their brilliance, you will get a result that you could not have even predicted. It would even probably be better than what you could predict. And so I think we need to take that a bit more
Yeah.
seriously, like to create the conditions to allow for the creativity to emerge
Yes.
and come out, because that's what you need to do,
Yes.
because you can't predict the creativity itself.
Yeah. And a lot of
Yeah.
people misconstrue it by thinking, oh, I need to have massive resources for
Mhm.
creativity to thrive. Um, Massive resources definitely helps, but it's not the end game. It's not the only thing. I think creating an environment and exposure. You see, I was watching something today on Reels, Instagram Reels, where in Uganda, I think it should be in Katwe, where this guy pulled over with, you know, a car. That I think was hand built. You know, the tires look like those cars in the 60s, and cardboards and some metallic stuff and some washed out seat, and he's driving this car convertible. I'm like, the first thing that came to my mind, I was like, oh my God, just imagine this person having the exposure and an environment where he has to draw in, maybe even like working with some of the smartest who have done that. Imagine that, how much of that would have enhanced his thinking. And I think that is what we forget, right? What we forget is like, um, I used to contend with a lot of my friends, especially back home, who are constantly referencing and saying, giving parallels to Mark Zuckerberg. You know, Mark Zuckerberg, he dropped out of school and formed Facebook and blah, blah, blah. Bill Gates did not finish his university and did this. And then I asked them a very basic question. From which university did they drop off? From which university? They didn't drop off from Makerere University. They didn't drop off from Gulu University. They drop off from maybe Harvard. That alone
Yeah.
is a whole different thing. And from what age were
Stanford.
they exposed to the technology? From what age? I was exposed to technology when I was joining high school. For the very first time, I I saw a computer was when I was paying my tuition for senior five. Very first time in the bank, very first time. There's no way I can compete with Bill Gates, who started at the age of 3. There is no way. There's no way. I will try my best to be at some level. There's no way. So those are the things that, and I'm telling us, like, we need to put that into context as well. It doesn't limit us from achieving the highest we can, provided we have that environment we create for our kids, ourselves. You know, yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, no, it's good you touch on that, because we probably understand this from like the financial sense of, like compound interest, right? And like everyone knows interest compounds, and like if or the value of a property does compound. Like if you
Yeah,
buy a certain money now, you get it, 10, 20 years later. The longer it's around, the more valuable it becomes. Or it may lose it may lose the value depending, of course, on the circumstances, like if war breaks out. But under situation under a situation whereby there's growth and development happening, it will grow, it will compound, right?
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
and so that compounding, it's more like the compounding principle is the same with skills and you'd say skill sets. Over time, if you can't discount time, right? Time is a very important factor because it's that being in the moment and repeating that again and again and again. It's through the repetition that it can compound.
Yeah.
And so you have to allow for that. And it pays off in dividends. Like it always pays off. And that's why you see, like you're sharing that for someone, for these guys who started uh, working with computers at the age of, toddler age, right? Um, by the time they've gotten, to high school, they have already covered all the things you have to learn. Than if you are going to just start learning at high school, like, both of us, we started a bit late in life, but so I always wonder, like, if we had started earlier, where would we have ended up? Like,
Yeah.
what skills would we
Yeah.
have unlocked?
Yeah.
What would we have been able to?
Yeah.
And so that's where the exposure comes in. And fortunately, for people who live in, let's say, these first world countries, they have built these societies whereby they have worked so hard to address the basic problems that would hold back someone, such that they can create a space whereby you can be a creative. Like, they allow for that creativity to come out by putting in place shared resources, shared tools. Like, for example, if you go to a library here, like a public library, the kinds of things you'd have access to,
Yeah.
it's amazing, right? You
Yeah.
can get a room, you can get a meeting room, you can get a sound
Yeah.
booth, you have access to a computer and use all these things without having to pay for this fast internet, and
Coffee.
and you have
Yeah.
access
Drop
to,
coffee.
yeah, right? Like, you have all these people, all these things which are readily available for you to use in case you want to do that. Um, but growing up in a third world country, you don't have any access to that.
No.
Like, you have to. It's kind of like if you're a dog and you have to walk yourself, right? You
Yeah.
have to walk
Yeah.
yourself and you have to feed yourself
Yeah.
and still, live with your master, right? and and so it's a bit of a challenge. But I think also what that's calling us to do, sort of like, is to be better examples. Like, for example, like when we're getting exposed, you find that now you can actually help out people who are in a situation that you've been in before, because now you have a bit of resources, you have
Yeah.
a bit of tools to help. But like you said, people get confused about this. They think it's about the resources, it's
Yeah.
about the tools. But it's really not. Like, the resources and tools, you can fix that. Like, even, let's say, me starting this podcast, it's like I needed to know what it's about and what I want to do with it before we can get into the tools. I mean, you can always change the tools. There's a lot of
Yeah.
innovation that's happening.
Yeah.
You're going to change the kind of tools you're using, but you must have the thing in itself, the thing that you're doing, or the thing on offer, or the practice. And without having that practice, the tools won't really help much, right? Like, if you don't have the passion to kick the ball, it doesn't matter if they give you boots,
Yep.
or if they cut the grass,
Yeah.
or if they they put a crowd around you. If you don't want to kick the ball, all that's not going to change.
It's not.
You
Yeah.
don't want to go into, you're not going to want to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll pass it back to you.
Eh, so much to draw from, and we are in a unique position because let me speak for myself. I'm privileged to be in a unique position where, to some extent, I understand like both worlds. I'm not an expert in either of them, but when I see something, just over coffee yesterday, you were telling me of, somebody can be so much amazing, years of experience, but still stuck with the same thinking. And we see that a lot. you know At the time when we were either peers or growing up listening to such people, we would say,
Mm.
wow, that is really brilliant. And then all of a sudden, we start growing either in different directions, different environments, right? Different exposure. And then we start picking things like, oh, I think that is either outdated or I don't think there's a context to what they are saying. you know, and the only thing we are able to identify that because we have had some sense of exposure. Now, so you can easily say, oh, yeah, I think, yeah, but then you still empathize with their situation because you're like, imagine if they were in such a place, maybe such a mindset, maybe things could have been a little bit different, right? Um, but because of the experience you have, you can easily resonate with what is happening, even though you're like, well, maybe some things could have been revamped and a little bit, but you resonate with it. On the other hand, when you see things happening in where you are, you actually have some understanding like, oh, yeah, it's actually not as straightforward as you think. Just think of it this way. Before you move your life and your family into the world you live in today, all you had were theoretical thinking. Oh, is this like this? Is yeah, I hear this like that. Perhaps even in your geography class, you might have learned all this world from a whole thousands of miles away, but never had the experience to live it. Now you have the experience to live it. Some boxes are being ticked, but some boxes like this is not what I knew, right? That is the power of exposure. Like to have that experience, to try and live it, and then you can say, oh, now I can have an opinion about it because I've lived it, I've felt it. But that creates more empathy because you look at something, you're like, yeah, I think I understand it. I tell my people, I think we did the last episode where I say I have transformed to become more empathetic and like develop the empathy to look at things without, my first opinion as judgmental, but rather to look at the person through which that communication is being viewed. That to me just comes through exposure, you know.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's you'd say that that is one of the cornerstones of exposure and growth. And it's interesting you touch upon that because um, you I was chatting about it with Fiona this morning. It's like we when you start to see the ways in which we get stuck, right? It's like it's only after you have been unstuck that you can see how you are stuck. Like
Yeah.
when you're still stuck, it's not possible. Like that kind of the convergent divergent thinking we were speaking about yesterday. Because in the moment you can only see what's right in front of you, how it's stopping you. And we have a lot of, these things back home whereby there's so much, there's no, how do I describe it? So there's not a limitation in terms of like the problems you can experience
Yeah.
or in terms of the blockers you can overcome. It's like there's a wealth of them. And it's so bad because then we start to lose the empathy, and in some cases it gets worse, that we get trapped in our sufferings, that we start to wear them as a badge of honor. And so in a case whereby if I see you suffering something that I have suffered before, I want to take ownership of that suffering and come to you and say, no, I know what this thing is you're suffering. Here's the solution for you. Just do this and you get out of it. But that undermines the understanding of like, look, you may have experienced something similar before, but this person's experience of it is also unique to them. And so you have to respect that. Without respecting that, you're going to shortcut, uh, the experience and them being able to generate a lasting solution to whatever it is that they're struggling
Yeah.
with. Now, of course, I'm not saying don't support, don't help, but it has to have that empathetic approach. Like you have to wait for the invitation, right? Like wait for the invitation for you to be able to uh, give the support, and and before that, maybe don't intervene with the process, because it is an experience. But like what we do a lot back home is like we wear our sufferings as a badge of honor.
Yeah.
My suffering is stronger than the one you've experienced, and if ever you're you're dealing with something like this, I am the one who has suffered it the most, so
Yeah.
I will be the speaking authority on this. I will tell you exactly what to do and how to get out of it.
Yeah.
But actually, no, it's
You
like
don't have to.
everyone's yeah, everyone's experience is different, and what would help is some empathy, some appreciation of, I think, Robert is going through something that I've gone through something similar to that before, um, and I can empathize with them. And so coming at it from a, a point of respect, a point of trying to understand their context and how it is that they're suffering,
Yeah.
will help you to know how to help,
Yeah.
but without you know shortcutting that and coming up with the assumption of like, no, I know what it is, it must be this,
Yeah.
and therefore I should give you this exact solution, this is the antidote to it,
Yeah.
and it should go away. Robs Robert of his experience and
Yeah.
disrespects what exactly is going on for him. And so you find a lot of people getting stuck in it and bashing his like, no, I know you're trying to help, but that's not what I want. Like what I needed was actually this, and it's shaped in this way. And then
Yeah.
you start to see a fight him as like, oh, I want to help Robert, but he's dismissing me, and I
Yeah.
don't know what's wrong with that guy.
Yeah.
Can't he see that
Yeah.
you know
I,
I'm
I,
trying to help?
I'll tell you a very good example that it was after talking with you that I snapped out of the situation. I don't think if you remember this, again, because I like watching a lot of stuff. Most of the things the algorithm recommends me are either related to business, entertainment, very less of the rest of the other things on social media, like, whatever. And sometimes I bookmark these things because I learn from them. And there was this specific example. It was after talking with you that I snapped out of it. And I will tell you this. So I was watching this Instagram reel where this guy was speaking of the ungratefulness of a bunch of some students in the US. And he said there was this black billionaire who went and paid student loans for, I think, was it 400 people, 400 students. He said, all paid. Let me use the number 400 for the sake of this conversation. All paid was like
Yeah.
all paid. And on top of that, I'm giving you my direct line, all of you, all 400 of you. And I'm giving you, let's say, 2 hours of my time every week where we can jump on a call and you ask me any questions of life skills, how to make money, how to grow, mentorship, ask me anything, right? Out of the 400, only 40 consistently follow through. I think you remember that story, right? You remember the story.
Yes, yes.
And so the guy telling the story, I just started unconsciously putting myself into his position. I was like, how dare they? How ungrateful are you? This is somebody who has made a living. He has successful and is doing this for you. And he has 2 hours of his time given to you after paying all your debts and is available for you. You must be really stupid not to take that chance, right? That's how I felt. And then you ask me a very simple questions like, did they need it? Did they ask for their student loans to be paid? Did they need to have that meeting? And I was like, oh, shoot. It just snapped. I was like, okay. This is a very interesting way to look at it. Even though from the emotional point of view, I'm like, oh my God, I wish I had an opportunity like that when I was growing up, but I'm different. I'm completely different. There's some people who need something different from what I need. Our ambitions are completely different. So, do I need help or I need support? What is it? Is it help or support? So, so yes, the billionaire did a great job, but did they need it? Maybe not. Maybe yes. Maybe the other 40 needed it. Maybe the other, whatever, 90% were like, thank you, I'm going backpacking. I've always wanted to go backpacking without having to work. Now that my student loan is paid, why do I need to work? you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's really a very interesting way to look at this thing, because I and this is something that also personally I've learned. I'm like, I think that people who need my support, they don't need my help. They need my support in sharing my experiences. Some
Yeah.
of them may need financial help, but they should be the one to initiate that. And I need to see either value linked to it or some sort of, and value can be many things, right? So when do I jump into support and when do I jump into help? And I think every time you help, you are emotionally attached to the help. It's like, think of it like you're walking on the street. This happened to me actually in New York. Um, I was in one of those fast restaurants. I think it was a pizza restaurant. So there's this guy, he's a homeless guy, I think. He just showed up and was like, yo, do you have some change? I want to get some food for myself. So I gave him $20, right? $20. Well, yeah, sure, you can go and get, right? Because $20 would get him dinner and drinks and whatever, right?
Yeah.
You know, so I ordered my stuff and I was seated there. This same guy went to this, where people dump their leftover food, right? This bin, there's a bin there in the whatever. You finish, you go and drop the things there. The same guy, just the next minute, is scouring through the leftovers. Now, I was like, okay, this is new to me, because he wanted money for dinner. I gave him the money for dinner, but I don't know whether the idea of the dinner for him was like, oh, now I have $20, can use of something else. Let me scour through the leftover. That bothered me. It bothered me because there I showed up to help, right? I showed up to help. Even though he asked it, then it started bothering me. So what I'm learned is I need to know when to help and when to support, really, because that is going to be great for my mental health as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's great for your mental health, and it allows you to know um, where you should stop, and what is it that you should do. Like, and I've told you about this. Like this guy, Ken Wilber, he talks about this in his work. He has what he calls the integral theory, and he says you you need to know like your scope of control and how to relate to the different things in every scenario. It's like there's the what's happening in I think you're familiar with the serenity prayer.
Yeah,
Lord, give me the
strength.
is it the strength to deal with what I can deal with, and
Yeah,
the
the
courage,
courage.
is it the
Yeah,
courage or grace to accept what I can't
yeah,
control?
yeah,
And it's very similar. It's like an extension on that, because he says you have the what he calls the I space, and what's in the I space is everything that that's within your control. Your capability, your physical capability, your emotions, your sensations, your thoughts. All that's within the
yeah,
I space. That's up to you to address.
yeah,
Um, but then he goes on and says there's like what he calls the we space. Now, the we space is like when two I spaces come together. It's like right now, right? Like we're having this conversation. There's certain things we have to have in place for this to happen.
yeah,
And there's certain ways we have to engage for this to continue happening. It's like, you speak, I listen, I speak, you listen. It's like we have to afford each other certain endeavors to maintain this we space.
Yeah.
Then he goes on next and he says there's the eat space. Now the eat is more like things we have to work with, like like the electricity right now, right? It's like it's not something within our realm of control. Like it could be cut off, it could something could happen to it, and we have to submit to whatever happens. So it's that's how we're relating to it. And then he goes on and he says there's what you call the eats space, whereby these many eat things that you can't control,
Yeah.
like they come together, like like a government, right? Like if a war breaks out right now, there's many things that are going to happen, and we have to respond to all of that and account for it in a certain way. And so he says, like every time in whatever situations, like there's those four levels of things that we have to be aware of and know how to adjust basing at which level we have control of and what we don't have control of. It's like what can we influence, what can we change,
Hmm.
and what do we have to adjust to. And I think when it comes to like help and support, we still have to know, we have to be aware of that. Like in the example you gave where this guy comes up, he needs help, you give the help, it's like that's it, end of story
Yeah.
for you. It's like what happens at that point, like once you handed over those $20, whatever happens next is none of your business. It's like
Yeah.
you may have sensations, you may have feelings of like, oh, I really wish i wish I wish they could just take the $20
Yeah.
and buy pizza and have it, but like it's up to them to do as
Yeah.
as they wish. And you get this a lot in these free societies whereby there's a lot of allowance of what should be allowed for. So there's a lot of people are given the freedom
Yeah.
to be what they need to be and do what they need to do, uh, because we hope that will bring out their creativity, their essence. It's like
Yeah.
it will make them manifest themselves more.
Yeah.
And um and I think the underlying idea is like if we do that, then they will be more responsible
Yeah.
for their parts,
Yeah.
right? Like they and you see that, like um in our communities, you have your scope of responsibility, right? And every time you're dropping a ball, like you're not mowing your lawn, this is
Yeah.
this is not good,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's like there's certain things you have to do to stay within the accepted norms and standards, and for any like for any collaboration to happen, we have to have, like we spoke about this before, like earlier in the conversation, like we have to allow for all parties to have contribution. And I think, like in the example you gave of this billionaire, it's like he had total control about these relationships.
Yeah.
Like, I've paid this,
Yeah.
it's not up to you,
Yeah.
and now that I've paid for this, I want to get this back in return.
Yeah.
It's like that's all about him.
Yeah.
Like if he had been collaborative about it,
Yeah.
maybe he would find like, oh, I don't need to pay 400 of them. Maybe I only need to pay like 20.
Yeah.
And those are the 20 or the 40 who are interested.
Yeah.
It's like, let's just deal with that. And
Yeah.
so without acknowledging that the other people have their own agency and they have their own desires and they have their own things that they want, then you can't approach it with respect. And then that also just generates unnecessary conflict. So
Yeah.
I think those were very, very good examples.
It is. And also some of the things we do are driven by our either past experiences, which also influence our emotional state. If you live in a place that, or if you are brought up in a place of scarcity, and then all of a sudden there's some sort of abundance, you will always be informed by the past experience. And perhaps that's why um I resonated with this guy asking for dinner, because all I thought was, you know this could have been me, you know
Yeah.
and this is just because of my like past experiences and so on. But also the other thing that was, as you said, it's like offertory in church. You put your offertory, how they use that money, you know you've done your part. So for me, I should have categorized that as support. I've supported him, so I really don't need to care how he's going to use that money, you know.
Mm.
And for me, I think that's a good state to be in, where um, sometimes I think, to that example, the billionaire would have been good to first, like, what is the needs versus the want. Maybe the student
Mm.
loan was the least of those guys' worries. It was the least of their worries. How do we do? Why do we prioritize other people's needs just because we have the resources to help? And I've even gone through this countless times, especially in the music. I remember this specific reason, where this instance where we're shooting a music video for this artist, and I hate, because we're thinking more into the business and whatever. We had all this map out. Oh, you need to come in and we do this, dress like this, put this type of hair, do what. It was too far from what the artist had in mind, right?
Yeah.
So we sort of imposed. And then we started seeing cracks all over the place. For example, like, we are sending like a stylist, this, TV interview, make sure the stylist can. And then we turn the TV and we're looking at, is a completely something that we didn't have in mind. And we're like, stylist, what happened? I was like, no, she insisted. You wanted
Mm.
this? Like, this is not me. So we learned. We're like, oh, okay. Maybe we should have understood their persona first before imposing on what we think this would visually fit you.
Mhm.
It's so much learning, so much learning. So
Yeah, so much to learn. And I think it's always good to maintain that open awareness to learning, because uh, it's interesting. Like, we were speaking about this yesterday about the convergent thinking. It's like you think that what you're looking at, that's it, that's the final state of it. But actually, it's not. Like, we live in a very dynamic world. There's a lot, like, you'd say one of the key attributes of life.
yeah,
Oh, sorry, balloons. Yeah, it's like one of the key attributes of life is the, the dynamism of life. Like, it's ever changing. That is a key quality of what life is to be. And the funny thing is that a dynamic situation can be experienced as being very chaotic, and so it can be uncomfortable, and so you want to order it and make it stable. And so you tend to gravitate, like, in some cases you tend to gravitate towards that. It's like, no, it's too much, there's a lot changing, therefore I should stabilize it. But actually, you need both.
yeah,
You need to be able to follow what is changing and how it's changing, and learning from it, and then making changes to what is
yeah,
stable, so that you can have the stability
yeah,
and also keep pursuing
yeah,
whatever the ever changing horizon is,
yeah,
has to bring forth.
yeah.
And that's what you're saying before. It's like you have to also leverage your past experiences. So, like, don't forget what has
Yes,
happened before,
yes,
but take the lesson on offer from that,
yeah,
and then apply it when you see, the next time around. Because, like, we sort of, like, sometimes forget that these things are going to happen again, but they do happen again,
yeah,
and we always get the opportunity to do better
yeah,
when we get the chance again. And so I think, like, that, for me, I find it as the ever ongoing challenge for us to continually work on our growth, continuous improvement, as
yeah,
as we would say, right? So
yeah,
you're challenged to always be doing your continuous improvement,
yeah,
uh, so that you can better deal with your challenges,
yeah, yeah,
and keep improving.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we also, um so what do you have control over and what don't you have? Um and also based on my past experience, because um by nature, like, when somebody tells me either their problem, I I just want to help. I want to jump in, right? And some of the things that used to bother me a lot, until I started understanding, like, oh, I actually have control on certain things. I don't have to do it. For example, um, somebody asked me, hey, I've run out of airtime. Can you send me this, airtime? Or I need a border money, or I need Uber. All I need is like, 10,000 Ugandan shillings or something, right? And it used to bother me. I used to tell them, like, look, I don't think you're using your contact well, you know. You're asking for a border money, and then 2 months later you're asking for me to help pay school fees. Those two
Mm,
don't work out, right? Because um the more smaller things you ask, the bigger in big quantity, the more compounding it becomes. And when they
mm,
compound, then I'm like, okay, this is a burden. Um, then next time a bigger problem comes, I already have compounding interest of so many things that, like, I'm like, no, 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 this can't, even so it actually goes both ways. Then what I learned was, like, it's not that I want them to compartment the problems. It's just the reasoning and the situation in which they are, which I totally don't have control over. What I do have control over is no, to say no.
yeah.
To say no. It should not bother me that they're asking for border, and then the next time they're asking for their car to be fixed.
Mm,
It should not bother me at all and start ranting like, you don't know how to use a car. No, 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 no. That is them, because their problem at a given time may not resonate with my problem, but it's nonetheless their problem because they all see it as smaller things building up to bigger things. In between there, there are other bigger things. So, yeah, the lesson here is, like, have control what you can. Saying no is good. Like, no, I'm not going to do it. And then when you feel like you have to do it and you have the resources or whatever, then do it. But don't whine about after doing it. Like, you know. So it's just so much lessons learned. Like, bro, dealing with different people from different walks of life. Um the one thing that I think I I love some of these challenges for some reason. They just they make me sane. At the same time, I learned so much about myself than I've learned before, through the lens and actions of other people interacting with myself, and then make some adjustments as I go to improve me, continuous
mm.
improvement. you know, yeah,
Yeah, it's really good. Like, and some of what you've touched on there, it's like you you get to a place because, and I think I attribute some of this, like, like our cultural and traditional upbringing, right? It's like when you grow up in a, let's say, a tribal culture, a tribal society, um, there's a beauty to it whereby there's some things which you get for free, like, things are given to you. It's like you're given a definition of who you are, how you should be, and how you should engage. So you're never going to be very much confused about it. It depends, well, how you look up at it, right? It's like you might feel like you're constrained to a certain, uh, you know, you'd say limited structure. However, on the other hand, uh, you don't have to figure out what that is, because, like, you may end up in a situation where you don't know what you are and
yeah,
what you could be, and that's a whole different subject.
yeah,
But once you've grown up with certain presets, if I may call them that, or certain givens, um, the unfortunate part is you're going to get to a part in life where you have to redefine those and sort of like extend them. And so, uh, if you have known a certain way of doing things, you get to a place and you realize that, oh my god, I don't think it works anymore, right? I need to I need to redefine it. I need to reinvent it. And I think some of these challenges you're sharing are coming from that. Like for me personally, I found that even that, because you we grew up in a place whereby, or a situation, at least for myself, they if you reveal yourself or you reveal your intention, it's considered some kind of weakness. It's like you don't do that. You're exposing yourself. It's a strategy that does not work for you. However, on the other hand, if you did, then you're sort of like, uh, you know, e- e- embracing your integrity and showing what you stand for and being clear about what you want to do and what you don't want to do. And from the example you shared there, it's like doing that more often then sort of like leads you to know exactly what you should do and what you shouldn't do and how far to go with certain things. And when you don't limit that, when you don't have that limitation, it can become a problem in the long run,
Yeah.
right? It
Yeah.
can become a challenge that you have to overcome. And so I think it's a very, very important thing to
Yeah.
sort of like
Yeah.
uh, participate in doing. Yeah.
It's intriguing how we evolve as humans. And the learnings, the unlearnings, the retrofitting, the adjusting, and adapting. These are capabilities that are very, very sometimes blowing for a human. And it actually speaks to the fact that we have the capabilities to do more than we think we can or we could. Um, given circumstances, the environment, the situation, feelings, emotions, and all these other things. Um, and for me, like being part of like trying to do, put my hands everywhere here and there. I have seen some of the things as things that perhaps I'd wished to do long time ago, because maybe I didn't have the opportunity. But also is like sometimes when you fix, quote unquote, all your problems, basic problems, you need more problems. You need more challenges. I think challenge is the right one. No. When I was growing up in Uganda, I would interact with every kind of thing, including, survival for the fittest. Like you see a dog, you're like, I think it's not top of my priority, right? Because you're worried about electricity is going to go off. You're worried about rent. You're worried about clean water. You're worried about like basic necessity of living, of life. And then you find yourself in a situation where the basics are covered, so I don't need to worry about the basics. And then you're like, oh, there's actually a dog. Now all of a sudden you're like, oh, it's for me, that transition speaks to what we said earlier on, that the exposure and environment really play significant part of our evolution, our thinking, our mind expansion, and even compressing our minds. Things that we interact with day to day, we see, we feel, we live, they contribute so much into some of those things. But through it all, if there's a continuous improvement, I'd rather take it. You know, and all of us have different trajectories. We have different paths to digesting, ingesting, and internalizing situation, growing. We have different layers of growth. So
Mm.
there is no specific timeline for everybody to be somewhere. Even though when they have all the exposure, they have all the things at their disposal, conducive environment, we still grow at a different wavelength. So,
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think we have to be mindful of that and respectful of that and account for it in these scenarios. Otherwise, uh, yeah, it sort of like leads us in a place where we don't want to go. And so, yeah, and it's every time we do that, I think we have managed to see progress. And so it's great. So unfortunately, we can't talk forever.
Yeah, yeah. This can go on
We would have
forever.
to bring it to a close.
Yep.
It's been really, really a pleasure talking to you as it always is. And we probably should save the rest for the next one
Yeah. Yeah.
because we could keep going on forever. So thanks, Robert. Thanks for joining me again. And it's been a pleasure having you on. And yeah, whenever we publish this, I'll add all the links
Yeah.
in the notes. So thank you for joining me once again.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure talking with you, exchanging all these ideas. I'm really genuinely happy for you for doing this, and yeah, for sharing, and hopefully somebody out there will pick a leaf or two, and learn from some of the experiences and the different guests you bring to share their life experiences. So I really appreciate that, and yeah, thank you so much. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.